and Regeneration. The only absence I've actually got, speaking to Emily, is Councillor Robert Francis Davies. Is that the only one, Emily?
We have received apologies from Councillor Francis Davies and also Councillor Rob Stewart today.
Stewart, okay. I was informed that Councillor Steve Gallagher would be a bit late, but I can actually see that he's here, so welcome anyway, you know. Right, any disclosures of personal and prejudicial interests? No, can't see any. Prohibition of whip votes and declaration of party whips. No whipping for this, okay. Right, minutes of the previous meeting. That was on the 7th of September 2021. Page 1, 2, 3 and 4. Any comments on the minutes? I know the only thing I actually picked up really was on page 4 about the city deal, you know, the 15 million funding for the Swansea University Health Project. I don't think we've had a reply as such actually from that. I think we need to chase it up. I do understand that the original 15 million allocation was for the Box Village, and the private contributor to that project pulled out, and I understand that the Trinity St David's is now actually funding it totally themselves. I'm not sure when that project is going to start, so if we can re-request that, Emily, please. Okay. Any public questions, Emily?
No public questions today, Chair, no. Okay.
Right, we move on to item 6 then, which is the city centre transport plan update. Can somebody actually show this on screen, or are members actually happy with actually, you know, hopefully everybody's actually read it anyway. But does anybody actually want it on the screen? No, everybody's happy. Okay, right. Who's actually going to take us through this?
Well, I'm happy to introduce it, Chair, if that's acceptable to you. I just wanted to make a sort of a brief introduction, and I can see that I'm joined on the call by a number of officers involved directly with transport, and also I can see that Hugh Mowbray is on the call as well, and obviously you're all familiar that Hugh is involved with the city centre redevelopment and regeneration specifically, but a number of transport related officers are on the call, and so I was just going to give you a bit of an overview, really. Officers can make their contributions on, you know, the more detailed stuff. And then really, you know, it was your call. I didn't know if you wanted to give plenty of opportunity for members to ask questions, because, you know, it's quite a detailed document. It's 20 pages long, but it's about how looking at the future it is really. It's a bit different than normal scrutiny that I attend, because normally when I attend scrutiny meetings, you're asking me about or quizzing or questioning on things we've done or are about to do. But this is a bit more forward looking. So, but you know, I'm more than happy to willing questions honestly and openly as I and officers can. But I just wanted to introduce it really by saying it's a report that we commissioned Atkins to help work with us on producing, and it's all about, you know, we've got huge plans, as we're all aware, for the redevelopment and regeneration of the city centre. I'm very conscious about the fact that you can't do that. You can't build all this infrastructure without having all the facilities that go along with it, not least of all under the heading of a travel plan, and the impact that has on, or potential impact it has on, you know, all modes of transport. So how will they be accommodated in the new city centre? We have to look at all our highway infrastructure, our car parks, active travel, public transport, visitors, air quality, park and ride, traffic levels now and future predictions, and all of that in with the backdrop of what we currently, this unknown situation we're in now, with the pandemic. Obviously now we are not back, and Matt is much more of an expert in these fields. We're back to sort of similar to pre-COVID levels in the city centre, but the patterns have changed dramatically. So as you're all aware, not everybody is back working in the office, not least of all us. So my expectation was there'd be less traffic in Swansea, in the city centre. But overall, that's not the case. There's just different changes, and I'm sure Matt, I don't want to steal his thunder, Matt will go into more detail, to give you an heads up on that. But it's trying to predict the effect and impact of the growth of the city centre, how we are going to accommodate future traffic management of all of that, including all, as I said, car parks, active travel. And really, we're in this really difficult situation of the pandemic, trying to anticipate what it's going to be like post-pandemic, regardless of the development as well. So are the traffic levels ever going to get back to normal, regardless of all the development we're doing anyway? And then we add that into the mix. We've got to look at electric vehicle accommodation, making sure there's enough charging infrastructure points, the environmental considerations, by the city centre growing. If traffic flows grow, then obviously that has an impact on air quality, the environment. We're looking at as well, although this travel plan is predominated on the city centre, are there things we can do outside the city centre that'll help ease traffic into the city centre? So the obvious ones are park and rides. The other ones are developing hubs. We're looking at Goward and Portadilla as Cosignan as traffic hubs. And can they be used and benefit, the public transport? Perhaps people will use public transport more to go into the city centre rather than using their own cars, etc. As I said, and all of that with this uncertain background we're in at the moment. So that's really all I want to do, is sort of paint the scene and set the scene of, there's no stone unturned that we're not looking at. Because it's not just about traffic flows, which a lot of people would imagine it is. It's about all that other stuff that goes on that impacts on that traffic flow. So I just wanted to introduce that as an overall. I think I'm sure everybody has read the document, and that gives you a full flavour of the challenges that we have to look on. But there are challenges we can and will meet, obviously. But I think having the pandemic, around us at the moment has just confused the future, prediction slightly. But that's something we have to deal with. It's part of our normal issues we have to deal with, and I'm sure that's something we'll overcome. But as I said, it's just wanted to give you confidence as well that we are looking at every aspect of the impact of the growth of the city centre in a positive way, obviously, and we will accommodate all the needs of future users and visitors to the city centre.
Okay, thanks for that, Mark. And I'm glad you actually pointed out that in essence it's a city centre report. I know it actually mentions the South Wales Metro as such, which is perhaps the area, the bigger area itself and so on. Before I actually perhaps ask or invite one of the officers to perhaps take us through the report, give us an overview. As I said earlier, as Mark has said, hopefully people have actually read it. Does anybody actually want to comment or make a question, Mark, at all on the introduction? Yeah, Councillor Sorry.
Thanks. Thank you very much, Mark for the introduction. I think this is about the 4th or 5th travel plan I've seen for the city centre, and when the officers have finished, I would like to question quite a number of issues that are in the report, because excuse me, having seen a number of these reports on the same item come up in a number of them, I'd like to know what the difference is with this one and the others that have gone before it. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Mike White.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, as following on from Holly said, yeah, no, very interesting document. Yeah, and I'd like to find out, be more interested and see exactly where we're going in regards to the setting up of introducing more sort of cycle areas within the city and county Swansea. You know, sort of plan to try and keep cars out the city centre, but to encourage more active people to cycle. So I'm interested to hear exactly what the council's intentions are in regards to setting up more places for people to have use cycles across the city. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, right, thanks for that. I can see nobody else actually indicating. Who's going to introduce this?
Well, can I, Chair, before, I mean, Councillor White asked the one about cycle infrastructure. Like, as an update, I'm not quite sure if it is in, I think it touches on it in the report. I can't remember which page it's on, but we have been successful over the last year or so in, so certainly in direct answer to Councillor White's question about the park and cycle op storage, we have constructed, it's not operational quite yet because we haven't worked out the finite detail, but we have constructed a park and secure bike storage facility at Fabian Way Car Park and Ride. That's already put in place because, again, one of the gaps in this, you know, when we were looking at it previously, was it was a park and ride side, but what about people who wanted to park, cycle into the park and ride and then catch public transport in? So that facility has been built. It's not completed yet, but that's through Welsh Government funding, and we have installed something like about 6 or 7 bike shelters in the city centre itself. You know, for people who want to cycle into work or to shop or whatever, and so that their bikes can be, you know, put under cover out of the rain and all our weather that we get, you know. So that is something that we are looking to expand and grow, and we'll be encouraging, you know, Hugh Mowbray might be better qualified to answer this than me. You know, when we're looking at new developments throughout the city centre, one of the expectations is that, you know, sort of bike storage or bike provision is considered when those developments are being built. So to encourage employees and visitors to those locations and to use bike rather than car, you know. So yeah, it's as I said, we've tried to look at every aspect, and it is a moving target, this is, you know, and as new technologies come on board, I'm sure Councillor Holly mentioned about it's, you know, we've seen a number of iterations of a travel plan, and I'm sure in the future you'll see another few iterations of this travel plan, because, you know, it not only is the need change, you know, of the city centre itself changing, it's all the new technologies when they come on board change the way that we, you know, travel. So they will be, yes, there'll be constant changes to this travel plan, I'm sure of it.
Okay, thanks for that. I think that was one of the shortfalls actually identified in the report anyway with regards to active travel. There was no facility as such in the city centre. Anyway, if I bring in Stuart Davies, before you actually speak, Stuart, I can see we've got quite a number of officers actually here. Can we perhaps identify you? Can you introduce yourselves, who you are? I don't know if we'll start with Stuart Davies.
Yeah, certainly. I'm Stuart Davis. I head up highways and transport. I'll bring in Matt next. Is next one I can see on the screen.
Hi, I'm Matt Bowyer. I look after the telematics section, which is traffic signals and intelligent transport, and also the transport modelling function within the council, and also development control. So I've got a number of hats, which all kind of feed into the development of the city centre.
Yeah. If I bring in Mark Thomas next, Officer Mark Thomas.
Good morning, yes, Mark Thomas, Group Leader for Traffic and Highway Network Management.
Okay, thanks.
And I'll bring in Gavin Newman next.
Morning everyone, Gavin Newman, Parking Services Manager, look after civil parking enforcement, the car parks and the park and rides.
Okay, thanks.
I think that's it from the highways and transport team. Obviously there's Phil in here in terms of from the planning and regen side, but they're
later on, yeah.
here. Yeah, I just wanted to, I think between either Matt or Mark, I assume you're going to run through in terms of a bit more of the brief overview of the report. I suppose I just wanted to build on the context as Councillor Thomas had sort of said, really. I guess the main thing with this is it's the very much a strong change in focus. There have been a number of iterations, as Councillor Holly said, of through time, the sort of transport and access strategies are reviewed. So I guess what we've done here is looked at the developments, the significant development opportunities that are arising. So we know from those opportunities that creates a demand, and that people are going to therefore want to access those sort of demand generators. But instead of simply looking at it, I guess, if we go back 20 years, 30 years ago, it's sort of, how many cars can we get? How can we get the car parking done? It's very much a different hierarchy, and I guess the hierarchy is sort of more informed by the Wales transport strategy. The basis of that hierarchy is sort of the top down. It's sort of the active travel modes in terms of making sure people can walk and cycle in terms of in there. Then it's public transport. Then it's sort of working down to basically private car is the kind of the bottom of the tree in effect, because of the certainly sustainability challenges and things that brings, and the ability, the negative impact it has in terms of on there. So I suppose that's the different thing here is there's a very strong focus on the different modes of accessing the city centre and how we're going to be in a different world ahead. Yeah, I guess that's the one key difference, just to the point that Councillor Ollie was making on there, really. So, but I think, is it Matt, is it yourself, or is it Mark that's going to be running through this one?
There we are. I'll start. Essentially, we've given the quite ambitious levels of development and proposed development within the city centre. It's apparent that we needed to sort of bring together the various separate studies and bodies of work that have been done on things like parking, public transport, active travel, into looking at what the issues are within the city centre in order to try and minimise the reliance on private cars, because the scale of the development would naturally mean that if we were to try and facilitate everyone getting there by car, then that could pose some challenges. So it's been split into a couple of work stages so far. First of all, to identify what the issues are, to review what we've already done, look at sort of key areas within the city, then look at possible options to improve the way that people move around the city, and then come up with a framework with which these options can be assessed, so that when these developments come forward, obviously every development has its own transport work, so we've got a common framework for assessing what people are proposing to do, and come up with some options, some amelioration options, which people can then feed into in order to improve connectivity in and around the city. Obviously, at the minute, there's a very strong placemaking theme running through everything that the council does and everything that planning do, which is all intended to make areas better, to reduce people's need to drive to places. Obviously, we accept the fact that some people have to drive places. I don't think you're ever going to change that, but it's identifying the opportunities we have to allow people who don't want to drive to not drive, essentially, to keep the city centre moving and to make it an easy place to get into and get around. I think, in broadly, that's what we're working in a nutshell. So we've looked at the various sort of the movement hierarchy for people getting into and around town, and obviously I'm sure you've all seen there's a strong focus now on what's called the movement triangle, which was pedestrians at the top of the hierarchy, and then various sustainable modes, public transport, and then private car at the bottom. So where are the gaps within the infrastructure in town and around town? And what kind of things should we be thinking about in order to plug those gaps? I think in looking at the existing data, Swansea's got quite a dominant flow of people from the local area into and out of town. And giving people the ability to do that without jumping into the car is clearly going to provide benefits for everyone. It'll provide benefits for people who need to get into the car to get into town. Limiting is probably the wrong word. Limiting is not a bad word. To limit the number of private car trips, because obviously we've got a finite road network, and we need to make better use of that in order so the development can come forward.
Right, does any other officer actually want to contribute to that or add to it? No. With regards to the, I'll kick off anyway. Oh, sorry, Chris, Ollie.
No, if Councillor Black wants to say something as well, so yeah, I think he was first.
Okay, Peter.
Okay, I've got some specific questions on the paper which is being lodged, if that's okay. Firstly, I'm going to have to refer to the slide numbers, aren't I? So we can work out what number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on the 5th slide. Existing conditions summary. There's reference to congestion hotspots such as Davati Signals and Fabian Way. My understanding was we were seeking grants to try to sort out Davati. And of course, I know there are plans in terms of running a road through SA1. So I'm just wondering, first of all, are we anywhere closer to getting something to sorting out Davati? And secondly, are we not risking, in terms of the new road going through SA1, creating effectively a rat run to give people an alternative to get on the Fabian Way? How are we going to manage that to protect those residents who are living in SA1 and the marina? That's the first. I got a few more, but I'll leave that one for now. If Matt's happy to answer those, or anyone.
The status of Davati, I'd better refer to Mark on that, because when it comes to funding, he would probably be better placed than me to know where we are with it.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. As far as we're aware, we've obviously applied for various external capital funding pots. To date, we've been unsuccessful. However, that doesn't mean that we're not preparing and revising applications on an annual basis to try and secure that funding. Again, the same goes for the link road from Owens Bridge through to SA1. We have the initial stages of funding for land purchase. We're consistently then going back to Welsh Government on a phased basis to try and secure additional funding to construct the road.
Okay. So, in terms of that second issue, are the designs looking at how we can try to prevent that rat run through SA1 and the marina?
Stuart, did you want to go first?
Yeah, sorry, just to emphasise, we're doing everything we can in terms of, we recognise Davati, just to add on to what's been said, we recognise Davati as a choke point. It's both a choke point in terms of private car access, but it's also it's a very pedestrian cycle hostile environment as well. It's it's somewhere that is of all the junctions in terms of, I guess, Swansea, that's really top of my list of ones that makes me feel uncomfortable, because it's been obviously designed a long time ago, which is this complete segregation from a pedestrian and cycle point of view, and it's it's not a good junction from that perspective. So I guess the approach we're trying to take is that it's a much wider solution. So we're trying to get it as a solution for active travel, also to enhance the sort of public transport flows through there, as well as tackling some of the congestion issues with how it basically the negative impacts the sort of car stacking and the air quality issues and things on there. So it's a holistic solution. I'm very keen we try and do that. It may be linked in with how we develop the top of the high street as well, because it's got a key influence on the whole of the city centre. So we're working hard on trying to get a plan that's that's going to get the backing in terms of from Davati, and hopefully provide a much better solution for both vehicular access, pedestrian access, and the general kind of environment and street scene. So that's one that we're progressing with. And we can start with SA1 as well. The link there certainly we're very much aware that the last thing we want to do is create it as a rat run. Where we see the benefit from here, if we can get a link through SA1, that it won't be one that will then connect back to the network. So it's going to be simply, the cars will split, and instead of coming down Fabian Way, they then bunch up at the down towards the gyratory. What we'd hope it'll do is as well as enhancing the the active travel sort of modes in terms of linking from the university down through there, it won't be possible to use it as a rat run to get through. But the intention is it'll take some of the pressure off some of the junctions along the way, which then cause some of the further congestion and delay problems on the Fabian Way corridor itself. So it's it'll most certainly be a kind of a restricted sort of route through. It won't give that opportunity for rat running, but very much a key part of it will be to be an improved public transport corridor as well as an improved active travel corridor. So that's certainly something very much on top of our thinking, that it won't just form another route for people to skirt around Fabian Way. And Mark, I don't know if you want to add anything onto that.
Okay. Can I just ask then on the park and ride? As long as I can remember, we've been trying to add to the park and ride sites. Obviously, this is down to funding, but the question is, have we actually identified possible sites, particularly from the West Mumble side, which could actually service a park and ride site? It seems to me that seems to be the most pressing need in terms of park and ride, is those coming in from the Mumble side.
If I can make a start again, maybe Mark and Matt and Gavin may want to come in. There's no specific site identified. I guess there's a challenge in terms of, certainly I consider it when you put in a park and ride from the west, because it's that thing of, for example, for anyone coming from Mumbles, it's for them to get into their car to then travel to a site which is on the outskirts, so they may only have driven 3 or so miles, and then get them to pull over and then change modes is going to be very challenging. So there'll certainly still be that thing of viewing whether where and whether there'll be a suitable park and ride location. I think possibly the bigger opportunity for us relates to the metro, and some of the funding that we've had quite strong kind of indications, well, very strong indications of support from Welsh Government for developing a metro solution. And that's the intention there, would be instead of people having to, or as many people having to sort of jump into a car to sort of then access an outside sort of park and ride, is that they'd be able to carry out the journey without getting into a car in some of those situations in the first place. So so that's where I see more opportunity. But to answer your question, there is no determined park and ride site at the moment to the west. But I don't know if anyone else wants to come in, Mark or Matt or Gavin, on that too.
So what would a metro look like from that in that part of the area? I mean, are we talking a specified bus route, or are we talking a train, a tram, or what are we actually looking at in terms of the metro on that part of Swansea?
We don't know at the moment. I think that there's a difficulty, and we've had a lot of conversations with this, because the challenge with the word metro is it drums up, for a lot of people, it drums up, I don't know, that you're going to get on a tram, a light rail type of solution, and that's what the picture of it is. The metro solution, or the word metro in terms of for its use in Wales, and this is across these sort of 3 main metros being developed, the South East Wales, South West Wales, and one in North Wales as well. It's very much about being multimodal. So it will have, again, following the hierarchy, much improved cycling, walking, cycling, then the public transport, which is basically about integrated public transport. So it'll be there'll certainly be bus-based will be a significant part of the solution. So it's high quality, high frequency, good interchanges, so interchanges between all those modes. And then if there are opportunities for light rail or linking to heavy rail, wherever it is from there to enhance, then that's what will be considered. But we don't know at the moment. The work's still underway, looking at what that would mean for various parts to the west. Significant parts of the city, it won't, there won't be a light rail or a enhanced heavy rail solution or anything. It will be, more to some form of bus space, whether that's demand responsive, whether that's feeder routes to key corridors. That's what the work will be, to determine what the best solution is for the greatest percentage of the population.
So over what sort of time scale are we talking about before you actually have a sort of blueprint, if you like, of what that metro is going to look like?
About 30 years.
It'll develop as time goes by. There's a number of different strands to it. There's quite a lot of work going on, for example, at the moment, looking at the main line, the Swansea and West Wales main line routes. So how we improve journey times and things on this. There's different strands of this work going ahead. There's bus reviews currently underway. It's looking very strong indications that we may well be part of a future, well, in the not too distant future, a kind of a hydrogen bus sort of corridor and things, which essentially for some of the key routes through Swansea. So that's that'll. From what I understand, the procurement exercise for those buses will be undertaken fairly soon, in terms of within certainly within the next 12 months or so, if things go well, and obviously be a lead in. And there'll be other things which will tie in. For example, our bids for local transport plan funding will have to kind of, I guess, align with metro aspirations and show how they improve the hubs and the linkages. So it's going to be a measure. I mean, part of the South West Wales Metro again will be things like back on with electrification for the electrification of the main line through to Swansea, which it's not going to happen in terms of in the next couple of years. But I think clearly there's been possibly a lack of foresight with not having that investment being committed in the past. So, but I think with things like certainly the heightened awareness from COP26 and stuff, that we're going to have to get some of these modes changed for more sustainable approaches. So I think it's going to be, sounded like quite a waffly answer when I was listening to myself, Peter, but it's going to be a mix of long-term and short-term solutions.
Okay, thanks for that, Stuart.
Okay, thank you. Yeah,
thanks. Right, if we move on to Chris Holly now, can people who are not speaking switch their microphones off? Getting a lot of feedback. Chris?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Stuart, and the other officers for answering these questions. I've made a list here. There's about 25, maybe 30 items on it. And they're the same 20 to 30 items that I went through another Atkins report about 20 years ago. Nothing much has changed, because we've got a great big lump of water called Swansea Bay. And you've got limited accesses in and out of the city centre. Some of the purpose of the study is the same as the last couple, maybe 3 or 4. Nearly everything in it is the same existing condition summary, what Councillor Bach was just on about. Those points of conflict, if you like, between various road users have been the same in Forest Fach, have been the same in Sketty, have been the same in Devati, and some other junctions as well. The summary, having read through it, is quite, to put it bluntly, this is not much different to any of the others. The only thing that this brings out a bit more is active travel, which in all honesty, I know the Welsh government are pushing it. I know the UK government are pushing it. And in some cases, I can understand it. But let's be absolutely honest about it. We've got too many hills in this city to have a fantastic cycle system, unless you are a Chris Broom or someone of that nature who can go up some of these hills. You know, I see Councillor Wendy Fitzgerald's got her hand up. Have you ever tried cycling up to Pentlegare? Unless you've got a Kawasaki 750, it's a bit more difficult. I know, let's be blunt about it. And it all comes down to an age thing as well, and a sports thing. And please, when you're doing active travel, can you make sure that the cyclists actually stay on the cycle paths and not go on the roads like they do mostly? So anyway, the questions, you know, I started laughing when you said, when Councillor Black asked about Swansea West and the facility of park and ride. And apart from this metro, which I am not going to get involved in because I've got blame for every metro system that has ever been in existence, the actual metro, when the proposal was to take it down to Mumbles on the prom, I think everybody and their brother objected to it, and to have a terminal where the old Mumbles train used to have a terminal in the middle of Mumbles and Oystermouth, totally unacceptable. So the reality of all these travel plans are how much capital investment you get. And having looked through this, apart from quite limited amount of funding for cycleways, etc. You know, you talk about Baldwin Bridge and buying land. Over 20 odd years ago, a couple of people came down from the Welsh office and told us they were going to improve Fabian Way. That never happened. And the recent news about the bypass up in some part of North Wales having been agreed by everybody, and now the Welsh government saying, no, it's not going ahead because of pollution, you then start to think to yourself, many of the things that we would have liked to have done are not going to happen. One of the problems with Park and Ride is we actually closed one in Forest Fach. And why did we close it? Because people weren't using it. Because we don't make them attractive enough. Well, one of the ideas of the cross-subsidy of expensive city centre parking and using that map, subsidising the Park and Ride, which was your whole original idea of Park and Ride in other parts of this country and across the world, and primarily in parts of Holland and Germany, where it was used successfully, is the buses were virtually for nothing. And I was in Cambridge last week, where you didn't pay to park, you just paid for the travel, which we do. Now, if you make it attractive, then people will use it. But unfortunately, Forest Fach didn't work. So how do we make it attractive? You know, one of the arguments about Fabian Way is the Fabian Park and Ride, it isn't far enough out of the city to stop congestion, which is quite right. If it had been where Bay Studio is now, and you'd have had a guided bus route in, you know, yeah, that's fine. But that's all in the past. But having looked at this, apart from active travel, there isn't a great deal difference on it. And the option package 3 in the South Wales Metro, and there's a couple of questions on there, you know, that system, and I understand what you're saying, Stuart, about multimodal, about using, you know, just like heavy rail buses plus active travel and what have you. But, you know, there are many questions about who is going to be in charge of it. Now, I asked Councillor Mark Thomas, and I think he actually totally agrees with me, that the bus services in Wales should be transferred to local authorities, so that we have a direct control going back to what we had many years ago. And I think the problem with the South Wales Metro in its present form is who's going to operate and who's going to run it. A couple of very straight questions for you. We had travel plans for various things. We had one for the stadium, which didn't work very well. Right, couple of things I wanted to ask is timescales. on the packages, on which ones. Parking, I think there is an issue about parking when the stadium, when the arena opens, about parking there. You know, we're actively asking people to use their public transport to get back and forth. So are we going to put a price on the parking for the arena that is going to be prohibitive, which means that people will use public transport? And the other thing is about the hospital visits. One of the ideas about the ill-fated Metro bus, future transport, was the idea that the Welsh Government wanted a transport system between the two hospitals, which was efficient, quick, and, you know, to be honest with you, off the main roads, which we did. They put the Gilded bus route around Lando, etc. Are we looking at improving those hospital visits? Because car parking in Morriston Hospital and Singleton has become a nightmare, and unless we do something about improving those transports, which are incredibly important regardless of the city centre, as Councillor Mark Thomas said, it's not just about the city centre, this is about the whole region as well. Thank you.
Okay, anybody going to comment on that, please, and answer? There's quite a few points actually in there. Does anybody want to comment with regard to the hospitals, Mark, or anybody?
Sorry.
Stuart?
Yeah, sorry, I'll probably... Oh, just Councillor Thomas, sorry. Councillor Thomas, do you want to come in first? And I'll...
Yeah, just briefly. I mean, you can give some of the technical responses. I mean, that's quite a broad statement from Councillor Ollie there. I couldn't possibly answer most of it in one go anyway, unless we were here for a couple of days. But I think, look, I know there have been plans before, and look, there's been issues with delivery, okay? Through cost, funding, support, and a will to get things, and a need to get things done. I think there is a significant difference now. You know, we do need to develop a travel plan, not because it's something politically we'd like to do or we think it's a good idea, it's because we have to do it. Not only is there a political will to change the way we move around the city centre and around Swansea in general, there's a need to do it, you know, and that is clear from all the conversations. We're all public representatives, you know what your residents feel and believe. It isn't a choice to just ignore anything. We have to change. You know, there has to be more use of public transport by the residents of Swansea and Wales and the UK, etc., etc. So this is something that has to be addressed. The difficulties we've got is, you know, a lot of stuff, as we're aware, is not within our control. And every time I say that to anybody, whether it's a councillor or a member of the public, they see it as an abdication of responsibility. It's not. You know, to fix the transport problem properly, and Stuart touched on it, it requires all forms of transport. It isn't just the buses in Swansea. It's the road infrastructure, it's the cars, it's the electric, it's the hydrogen, it's the you know, train stations, it's trains, it's everything, and not all of that is within our control. Now, the reason why I'm confident that there will be changes is because there's a significant change now through Welsh Government with, you know, taking on the responsibility for transport within Wales themselves through Transport for Wales. So when we are looking at the Metro and multimodal shifts and integrated ticketing systems, I've been championing on about integrated ticket systems since I can remember. We haven't even got integrated ticket systems from bus to bus within Swansea for most of our bus journeys. There's a few that do it, but we can't even transfer tickets between NAT and First Coming on buses, yet alone trains and every other mode of transport. That is something that's clearly high on the Welsh Government agenda, and Transport for Wales are heading that up. So we are going to be able to buy a train ticket and use that same ticket to travel on buses, you know, around Wales. So that is definitely something that's going to change. But as Stuart said, there's a lot of stuff there's a lot going on, and to be able to pin something down on, can you name one change that's going to happen and when's it going to happen is a challenge. So if you're looking at the sort of transport to and from Mumbles, for example, Stuart was right. The thinking, and these are ideas that are being generated. There's nothing in plan. Working with First Bus on this as well is developing, main route lines, say, for one example, from Mumbles through to Swansea city centre on a regular basis. The challenge has always been for companies, bus companies, is going up to Newton and up to Bishopston and Pennard, and these long-routed, laborious journeys with quite often, sometimes not much on them, so not many people on them. So one of the examples would be is looking at sort of a network of smaller buses, mini buses or whatever, that would go around, feeder buses, I think they call them. Stuart, would correct me if I'm wrong on that. And they would collect people from the more outlying areas, bring them to the main locations, and then they get on the main transport routes. And that means that you can keep regular, 10-minute buses or 20-minute buses travelling up and down the main corridors, fed in by feeder buses to make that. That's just one example. It's not going to fix all the transport problems, but there's strong interest in doing something like that. And as I said, with the Metro, we're looking and working very closely with Transport for Wales on these things. The other thing is, I'm very optimistic about the relief road on the SA1 corridor there, on Fabian Way. The Welsh Government has put its money where its mouth is. We have already started land purchase. And, we're not talking about insignificant amounts of money here. We, running into millions of pounds in purchasing land to make that road, buildable or achievable. And I don't believe the Welsh Government's in the business of giving money away, to a local authority like us, and then walking away from that. So, we haven't got, I haven't got a checkbook or a check in my hand that says, here's another X million to develop the road. But we're all confident that this is going to lead to that road being built. But to give you a date on it, that's something where our hands are tied to a certain extent. But there is confidence, but the confidence is born out of the early signs that we are seeing and the funding we get in, plus this, the new initiatives being headed up by Transport for Wales, where, transport for the first time ever is under the public transport is within the remit of Welsh Government. It hasn't been previously, and now it is something, that is going to change. But again, it's driven by need, it's driven by environmental need, it's driven by the fact that we can't continue, people continuing all these journeys by car. Something has to change, and it will change. The challenge for us is, or the difficulty for me sitting here today in response to Councillor Hawley is, I can't give you a date when I can say, well, on the 31st of March, we are going to be doing X, Y, or Z. But, I suppose it's the old adage, time will tell, and it is, we will see significant change in the coming years over this. There's no doubt about that. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks for that. Stuart, do you want to comment? If we can move it along as well, I've got a few people actually want to question. Stuart, do you want to comment at all?
Okay, just on a couple of things. I suppose, Councillor Hawley, first of all, at the beginning you were saying that nothing's much has changed over 20 years. Please, I'm going to have to come back on that just to say I think we've seen sort of significant improvements in investment in the network over that period. We've seen sort of step changes in active travel provision in terms of junction improvements. Some of the distributor routes have been put in. So I think we've really tried to tackle, and we've had made quite a big impact in some of those areas. So I think over time. I'm with you about absolutely with park and rides, very challenging. Forest Fach probably didn't work. It certainly the idea was great in terms of the difficulty is the sensitivity for drivers in terms of locations of park and rides. If they're not clearly visible and straight off junctions, they seem to, across the country, they seem to be able to struggle to sort of operate. And Forest Fach was one where, cost-wise, it just wasn't getting the patronage in terms of on there because the location wasn't sort of clear, visible, and ideal, and taking people off those routes. I think we will see a step change in terms of investment. To be honest, ahead, it's clear that the Welsh Government are, they're not going to continue to fund, major highway infrastructure. They sort of build it to deal with the capacity issues. The focus is very much on sustainable modes. They want to invest big in terms of the metro solutions and in terms of public transport. So I think they're, it's clear the messaging, they won't continue to fund the other routes. So, I've certainly at the moment got a degree of confidence that there'll be quite large investment going in. In terms of the costs of different things, the public transport, again, I agree with you on that. I know Councillor Thomas and the Cabinet have been very keen to push on the initiatives for the free bus travel at key times of following on and making those free to try and encourage the uptake, because again, it's this thing, if you get people comfortable with public transport, if you can, it's almost like building that kind of demand. So there's been that commitment for, as we know, during the summer and ahead. I think there's further commitment for that. So, and that's something that's been looked at by Welsh Government as well. So I think, certainly those things come into play. I'm trying to think if there's any other key points. I think those were the main ones, but if there's anything else, sorry, that I missed, let me know.
I think there's 2 points really. I do agree with you. There's been some small improvements in some of the active travel, yeah, but on the junctions. But the hospital visits is the one which I think is very important for a lot of people, which you've missed, and also about the fact that whatever modal shifts we have, we've got to rely on those places where that modal shift takes place, that it's not freezing cold or pelting down with rain, because that is the issue. If you've got people waiting in an open area, waiting for a bus or waiting for whatever method of transport you want to talk about, if it's out in the open and in our climate, let's be blunt about it, it can be sunny one minute and the next minute it can be howling in rain. So I think there's those issues and those issues. And if we look at the Gowerton Gysainen interchange, there is very little, if any, cover on that interchange. And when that was discussed, or the Welsh Government wouldn't fund it. And I think those are the issues, Stuart, that really get people's backs up, is the fact that we have to plan, and we have to plan for the future. And the problem is there hasn't been that. I hope you are right, and there is a change from the Welsh Government and a change from everyone else, and it has happened. The main reason for his FARC didn't work, in all honesty, was the signage was appalling and it wasn't opened enough.
Okay, right. We'll move on to Wendy Fitzgerald now, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes. Well, really, following on from what Chris said and this reference to the existing conditions summary, it does say, bullet point 2, the strategic sites are forecast to attract a significant volume of traffic to the central area, exacerbating congestion on corridors already under pressure. Now, given that a large number of strategic sites are supposed to be constructed in northwest Swansea, and given that Chris has referred to the fact that we in Pennsylvania, for example, where we are supposed to be having 850 houses plus another 180, we're at the top of a hill. I can't see cycling being a realistic potential for a lot of people. So, and again, following on from Chris and the fact that Forest Park and Ride has closed, where do you envisage a park and ride facility in northwest Swansea where there are going to be so many strategic sites? Logically, I would have thought that this would have been an area where a park and ride facility should have been already identified, given the number of houses that are supposedly going to be built here. Anyone comment on that, please?
If I could certainly comment a little bit in terms of on there. Park and ride site hasn't been determined in terms of on there at present, but however, I think from a housing development perspective, any of the sort of development sites, you know, a key part of what's considered is how to improve the access public transport rather than getting people driving from the development to a park and ride and then going on into the centre. It's how the sort of enhancements to public transport corridors, so that people don't actually have to get into their car in the first place, and that it prevents those journeys. And that can be via the sort of transport hubs and things, which might be either small distributor services in terms of in the developments themselves, then linking into key corridors or improving those key corridors to take up on the development sites. But that's certainly part of you know, what gets considered in terms of in there. So, you know, it's the opportunity to expand on the network so that so I guess it means that people don't have to default to having a car in the first place. And I think that's the sort of you know, backbone of, as I say, the Welsh transport strategy, and the kind of it's trying to take away the barrier for people in terms of transport, that if they're not without a car, then they're not going to be disadvantaged. So that's the key part of the thinking.
Right. Well, thank you for that. Yeah, I can understand exactly what you're saying. It just seems to me a little surprising that there is no prospect, presumably, of park and ride. You are reliant on people opting for a far more efficient bus service. That, in effect, is what you're saying. And I just wonder if that is actually realistic. I mean, at the moment, as you will know, there is a park and ride facility over in Velindre. Now, presumably, that will go at some point if Velindre becomes what it is supposed to be. So it is a little surprising that, you know, park and ride in northwest Swansea is not going to be a high profile, and dependency on effective bus service is seen as a solution.
No, I wouldn't say that you know, park and ride is not being considered. It's just that we don't have a site determined at the moment in terms of from there. I guess to add to it, for example, we've got the Landor, the current facility in Landor, which you know, as everyone probably agrees, that's been, you know, it's part of a really important development site at the moment. But as well, it's far too close into the city centre to be in the correct location. So that one has certainly been reviewed, and the general provision of park and ride is constantly been reviewed in terms of for the city. So my honest view is I probably do see you know, that we will end up with a, you know, further park and ride, or I'd hope, you know, certainly to the northwest of the city in a location. It's just that we don't have the location determined at the moment. But I think the opportunity, I suppose much with what we've done in terms of with the park and rides, is try to integrate those park and rides with the enhancing the bus service, so you're not running separate, you know, necessarily just separate park and ride services, and you trying to use that opportunity to use the, I guess, the kind of base demand from a park and ride to complement an enhanced sort of public transport network as well. So that you're not getting kind of, I guess, either duplication of journeys and transporting sort of fresh air so much, really. So, but sorry, and see Councillor Thomas may want to come in on that as well.
Yeah, Mark, you want to comment?
Yeah, if I may, I try and be brief, Chair. Yeah, just to concur with what Stuart said, we are very much definitely looking at a park and ride provision for the north to serve the northwest of the city. And we're active in that as we speak. I mean, and as Stuart knows, we're not in a position to give details out, but it's finding the right location, and by right location means available land, but also the right location. And if you use Penllygare as an example, and the point that Stuart made is very, very relevant. If we were looking to put a park and ride site in Llwyther area or the Forest Fach area, are people realistically in Penllygare, particularly with the new, you know, housing developments that are likely to come there, to jump in their car, drive 1 mile, park in a park and ride, and jump on a bus? They're not. They're not likely to use it. So it's look, I was going to say that thing, location, but it very much is. It's critical because we are looking for a park and ride site to service a wide geographical area, and trying to get that location where it is in the right place for everyone is a challenge. But there is a determination. We will be building one. I'm as confident as I possibly can be in making that statement. There will be a new location and park and ride site developed to serve this area. But we've got to get it right. What we can't do is build another Forest Park site that was underutilized for all the various reasons, not through lack of goodwill and that, but it was underutilized and didn't serve the purpose of taking people away from using the car and preference of using bus. So it's critical that we get it right. It's taken a bit of time, but it's not. That's the focus of this. The reason for the time is if and when we build this new park and ride facility, it has to be one that's going to have optimum use. And it's got, because if people think it's too close to the city centre, if you drive almost into the city centre, are you likely to break your journey up, jump out of the car, and then have another journey by bus? If it's too far away, then that's going to be a challenge, etc., etc. So there's a load of factors to look into. But I just want to reassure everyone that there is an absolute determination to build a site to service this area of the northwest of the city.
Okay. Linda, I know you've been waiting quite a time. Do you want to actually speak now, please? Ask your question. Linda James.
That's it, it's unmuted. Yes, I'd like to go back to Peter Black's question about park and ride in the west. It's not just the cars coming from Mumbles that need to be considered, it's the hundreds that come down off Gower every day. I know from the traffic surveys I've done in Kittle, there are well over 5,000-6,000 vehicle movements through the village in both directions every day, most of it during the busy times in the morning and an evening. These are heading down to Mumbles Road. I just can't understand why we've not considered having a park and ride at Blackpill. The council's got a large car park there. There's a big open space there, and that's not the first big open space that's been left unbuilt on just off Mumbles Road. And to me, it just seems an ideal place to put a park and ride and collect some of this traffic that's going to pour onto Mumbles Road.
Stuart.
Yeah, my apologies, Councillor James. Sorry, I used the Mumbles as an example. Absolutely, there's access from the west. So I apologise if that wasn't, sort of ignorance of the other demands and things on there. The benefit we've got at the moment, and Matt is a font of knowledge on this, is really good kind of modelling information in terms of which enables us to build a really good picture of what's happening in terms of traffic movements right across the city. And we've got some really good detailed information on that. So it's it gives us the opportunity to look at where we are with things. But it's not that it's not being considered, and there's the opportunity to consider it ahead. We just don't have a site identified and the demand clear at the moment.
Okay, thanks. Steve Gallagher.
Hi, thanks. Just a couple of things. I pick up on what Chris said about this report. It doesn't really tell me a huge amount, if I'm perfectly honest. And I just wonder how much you actually paid for that, when I think our officers are more aware of what's going on in the city and could have done this themselves. But one that does highlight to me is on page 9, setting of objectives. And it says enhance the experience of residents of and visitors into the city centre. Now, after this update and briefing, we're going to be going to talk about updates on the arena and various other areas. I do accept totally what Mark has said about timings, and he can't give dates, etc., etc. I no doubt he wishes that he could say that perhaps in December next year we're going to have a new road which is covering everything and is going to make life easy. It's not going to happen. But we do have one date, which is March 2022. when we have an arena opening. Now, I visited the arena with a couple of the fellow councillors and had a look at the car park. And one concern I do have, which may be addressed later on, is the actual access and entrance to the car park. Directly off a dual carriageway, quite a sharp left-hand turn, and we all know what entrances at car parks are like. They get blocked, and there is no sort of source laid-by to allow easy access into that car park. And Oystermouth Road at that point is bad enough as it is. Take one lane out, as we surely will, is going to cause huge issues. And again, that car park, I forget the figures, but it's not a huge car park for the arena, will get full quite quickly. How do we tell drivers that that car park is full and they have to find another car park? Is it something that we need to address similar to what they have in car parks in Cardiff? We drive in from areas and it says this car park has a number of spaces, this car park has other spaces, or this car park is full. But if we don't have the signage in the correct place, once you pass the Princess Way Junction and you see a car park to the arena is full, how do you get to another car park? What other car parks are going to be signposted? We're going to start having some real issues without correct signage. And let's be honest, we haven't even got a sign which says welcome to the city of Swansea on Fabian Way. So if I do have severe concerns, and perhaps I'm not sure who could answer that, and if they would.
Anybody want to comment on that? Answer it?
I can answer that. As part of the arena scheme, we've been procuring variable message signs, and there's one up currently by the Patty Pavilion. There's two to go up on the approach the other direction, one by Sainsbury's and one further out on Fabian Way near the county boundary. These are linked to the car park machines, linked to the barrier machines, and then we can display. They're free text VMS, so we can write whatever we want on them within reason. But they can display number of spaces, and then we can also, because they're free text, we can tell people where we want them to go on the way into the city. So, the furthest sign might say, arena car park's full, use park and ride. Next right, or something similar. But we will have the facility to do that before the arena opens.
The other thing is that, could you tell me why we've got such a sharp entrance into the arena? It might not be in your remit, Matthew.
No. It is. Looking at the traffic data, the peak time for the arena car park on the south side doesn't really correspond with peak time traffic on the main roads. So I think the design of the car park entrance wasn't really in my remit, but I think realistically, looking at when that car park's going to be filling up and emptying at its busiest, that's not going to correspond with Oystermouth Road at its busiest.
I wish I had your thoughts and feelings on that.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Paxton or Williams?
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to come back to a word for a moment of convenience, and I suspect the real reason why people use their vehicles so much is purely and simply convenience, because public transport is not available to them to make it worthwhile hanging around for hours to get to various places. And that is why for many years now I've been trying to push the idea specifically of sort of small regional buses or local buses supplying into or feeding into key areas. And the typical one I would use, as far as I'm concerned, is perhaps a small bus around Upper Clay, Three Crosses, possibly Penclough, possibly Gout and Dunvant into Calais, and using Calais as that interchange, if you like, to get back into town from there. But we already talked about people, whether Councillor Thomas has anyway, about whether people are going to get in their car for a mile, get out of their car and then get into a park and ride, because it's just not sensible in that sense in terms of time. And that's why I'm coming back to convenience, and that's why I've been pushing for basically that sort of modal sort of delivery of convenience in areas where you can use small social services type buses which can get into estates quite easily, so people, and especially the older generation, can get onto those buses fairly easily. And I think that's what we need to be considering, and that's one of the things that needs to go into this sort of plan in that sense as well. And I think that could be used around many of the areas of the periphery of Swansea in that sense, periphery of the centre of Swansea, let's put it that way. And obviously, I think it's something that could be looked at, and I wonder whether the thoughts are in that respect.
Anybody want to comment on that point?
Well, I have asked what were the thoughts in that respect, yeah.
Yes, Stuart?
Yeah, very much. I think the concept of the sort of, well, from demand responsive to kind of feeder route services and things, which I think was touched on by Councillor Thomas as well on there. It is very much part of the thinking. I guess there's a constant look at what's going on in terms of best practice, not just in this country, but in terms of other countries as well, about how we get efficient, effective kind of public transport to serve the communities and the wider communities. It isn't efficient to have, large, some of the large, buses which are then kind of heading off around estates in different places, because they lose an awful lot of time and they're not actually picking up or dropping off that many people on the whole of those journeys. So having alternatives, which, as was touched on, possibly feeder routes, for smaller buses and different things, and, going to transport hubs, which then, was mentioned about some of those are drafty and cold. It's about the investment in those areas. So you've got kind of, welcoming kind of transport hubs, which people, if there is any sort of delay in the interchange, they sort of got somewhere they can, they're not kind of freezing cold or whatever, being blown around. So it is how we get that kind of blend of different things together. So it kind of complements and provides, you still maintain a high quality sort of key route corridors, but you've got good feeder services. So very much, Councillor Williams, it is part of the thinking, and along with different trials, TFW, Transport for Wales, have been carrying out different trials of different things, and I know there's trials in other parts of the country, other parts of the UK, as to what works best in urban, rural, sort of semi-urban type of areas, and that will inform a lot of the thinking in terms of for the metro options ahead.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Peter Black.
Yeah, so just one last quick question. On the slide option package 7, there's a reference there to real-time bus information for passengers. I spent a week in Oxfordshire a month or two ago, and very, very impressed with their real-time bus information, how easy it is to use public transport there. I'm just wondering, how far off are we from actually having that in Swansea?
Stuart,
yeah, again, this is certainly something that there've been challenges with, depending what services are running and what companies are running. So it's back again to this control in terms of the overall bus networks. But yeah, this is again one of if I listed the sort of things which were key in the thinking of what Welsh Government, Transport for Wales and the councils wanted, it would be integration, it would be real-time information, both, not just reliant on sort of mobile phone messaging and different things on there, but there are some very slick systems in place where you've got buy-in from all the operators, as you say, and some other countries are even further ahead, where you've got mapping. You can literally watch the sort of bus coming along and you know exactly when it's going to sort of arrive. So it's got to be there, because it's that thing, isn't it? If you're, if you want to gain confidence for people to use public transport, who, some people have to use public transport because they have no choice. And it's important that that's a really high quality sort of, offer for them. But if you're to get people to convert from, other modes and, private car usage, then, the most sort of frequent kind of thing which people talk about is about reliability. Reliability is knowing when that bus will come. So if they're shopping, they know exactly, yes, it will be there, or it's been delayed by 4 minutes. I'll stay in the coffee shop a bit longer and then I'll pop out the door and it'll be there. So that's very much, one of the key things in terms of the metros, having a, fully integrated system, which then gives that really high quality information about when the buses are going to arrive. So I think that'll be something that they'll want to try and deliver as early as possible in terms of for the whole of Wales.
I mean, Oxford has got 3 main bus companies, and literally you could stand at a bus stop and it said it's there in a minute. It was there in a minute. It was absolutely very, very impressive, and it didn't matter which bus company it was. It worked on that system. I just don't see why we can't do that as well.
Okay, good point, Peter. Right, I'm going to bring this to a close shortly, but Chris Ollie.
I'll be very, very brief. We used to have minibuses going around all the estates and in the city centre, and one of the most successful was the Gower Pony that went from west to mouth right around. Now, I'm not going to mention the person who was in charge of South Wales Transport when it was closed down, but one of the reasons it was closed down was because of the subsidy. And that's one of the things, and I know Councillor Mark Thomas and you, Stewart, are very keen that we look again at the subsidy that is provided to the bus companies and how it's worked. But they do work, and they work very, very well. And it's just a question of how do we actually get people to use them. And you're right about the instant timing, but I would like to emphasize we used to have these minibuses and they were successful. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. I just want to make perhaps a comment, really, and probably a question. We've got free bus usage for, pensioners. We've also got schemes that have been running for a few years with regards to, I think it's under 18s or whatever, free bus travel. I know there's expense actually involved, and know it'd have to be funded, by the Welsh Government. But if there was free bus usage at certain times of the day, have we ever actually explored that option, with regards to, going to the Welsh Government? I know there's other options. I understand Cardiff are looking to introduce charging for vehicles actually going into the city centre. I hope to go, we don't actually go down that road in the future, but have we ever actually looked at the option of actually getting the Welsh Government to fund free bus travel at certain times of the day for everybody?
I think, to be honest, we're possibly ahead in terms of from a Swansea perspective, say, because of the initiative which Councillor Thomas and the Cabinet have brought forward, which is to give the different promotions in terms of free buses for all. As I say, that's something that the Welsh Government have been very interested to see, the sort of levels of patronage and different things which are occurring. So they're very interested in the approach which has been taken in terms of on there. And it is going to be something that as say TFW and Welsh Government want to try and have much better control of the public transport networks across Wales, and it's the balance between the carrots in terms of the incentives for people to use alternative modes versus the sticks to discourage people from using, for example, private car and other transport. It's how much weighting you put on one compared to the other, but there has been a lot of interest in the study, which in terms of the promotions which have been in place so far and are committed to ahead. So hopefully that may help inform some of the thinking.
Okay, many thanks for that.
Can I, Chair, just on the last point? I mean, you made the reference. I have heard that Cardiff are looking to consider the charging zone effectively into the city centre. That's not something we as a council are considering. Certainly not at this moment. That's not. It's not on our radar. No, it's all the other stuff we've talked about, today, and we'll look at in the future, and measures to manage the traffic in and out of the city centre and all the other modes of transport without going down that road.
Okay, thanks for that. Right, okay, many thanks for that to Councillor Mark Thomas and Stuart Davis and all the other officers. Sorry, I haven't got all the names in front of me. You can actually stay if you so wish, or actually leave. I know you've got busy jobs. Right, if we move on to the next item, which is the project update report on the city centre. Before we actually go through this, I'm sure everybody can actually see that it's quite abbreviated to what we normally get. I must admit, I mean, I would have liked to be notified beforehand that it has been abbreviated to such a short version, but I understand it probably is a lot easier for officers to actually compile it. Anyway, let's see how it actually goes. Who's going to take us through us? Hugh, take it through it. Hugh?
Yeah, yes, please, Chairman. Can you see that on the screen?
Yeah, I can. Everybody else see it?
Yes,
Yes.
Okay. I think this was presented in this format last month to this group. What we've tried to do is to sort of just focus on the key issues which are facing each of the schemes as we move forward. So that was the sort of the logic and the rationale, and this is what is presented to the Regen Programme Board and Member Steering Group as well in that respect. Just starting off on Copper Bay, we are having a very serious issue in terms of labour and materials at the moment, and they are impacting the final stages of the project. And in fact, this week we've actually had a COVID outbreak on the site as well. So there's a few issues which are impacting the project at the moment. In terms of the hotel, as we've previously reported, there are funding difficulties in terms of the general funding market, funding hotels. We have been looking at an options paper for moving it forward, but we had a very positive meeting last week with Cairns, the appointed developer, and we are looking for them to provide us with a revised proposal. So we're waiting for that to arrive. The ATG Ambassador Theatre Group license for the arena went to licensing committee, and that's now been approved. There will be a monitoring of the commissioning events, which the first one's scheduled for the 20th of January, leading up to the formal sort of start of the proper ATG programming, which will start in March, and the majority of the program, which has already gone on sale, has now sold out. So it's been a very good story, and ATGs are very happy with the sales densities, and they're saying that it is ahead in terms of the amount of sales of other venues which they've got the same acts performing in. So that's very positive for Swansea in the future. So that's it on Copper Bay, unless there's any questions.
Okay, anybody? Steve, you actually mentioned, I don't know if you want to bring that up again, Steve Gallagher, with regards to the car park, or has it been answered?
I think he's left, Chairman, but
Oh, there we are.
I can try and answer that in terms of, part of the designs are there are two car parks. The one on the north side is designed to pick up people coming in from the west, and the other car park is looking to pick people up coming in from the east. So it's a split of the depth of people coming from different destinations to try and sort of accommodate people without too many crossings, sort of people crossing Oystermouth Road in that respect.
Okay, I can't see any questions there, but I've got a couple. You actually mentioned the problem with materials and labour and so on. I think Steve Gallagher actually mentioned earlier about the arena probably opening in March. Is that still on track for that date, or is it later than that?
No, definitely the arena opening is on track for March.
Yeah, have we got a date for the actual opening yet, or?
Well, the first events in terms of the first ticket sales are obviously it's early March. I haven't got the exact date to hand, to be honest with you, but there will be various completions of various elements of the project before that. But it's the first actual proper event in the stadium, which isn't a sort of a fire regs build-up event, will be in early March.
Okay, I've got a couple of other points, but I can see Terry Hennigan wants to. Terry, do you want to ask a question?
Only briefly, Mr. Gallagher said about the entrance into the car park. Am I right in saying that it's exactly the same way when the entrance to the car park of the leisure centre?
I think it's virtually the same, but that's the car park on the south side. So it's all been tested. It's all been fully sort of signed off by Highways colleagues. So we don't anticipate any problems in that respect.
Okay, yeah, it's a couple of points I'm bringing up. You know, when we actually visited, you know, it is quite an impressive site. You know, quite compact. But with the, you know, I would say probably difficulties. Of course, it's very near the flats and so on, and you know there have been concerns with some of the residents actually around there. One of the problems, you know, I could see, well, two problems actually. One was the lights, you know, the how light it was and so on. But a resident actually approached me and said that they haven't got planning permission for the lights. Is that correct? Or
no, that's not correct. All the LEDs were included in the original sort of planning application, so that they have got a planning consent. So that's not an issue. And in fact, there are 92,000 LEDs across the whole facade, and they do significantly fade to the rear of the scheme. So there is limited lights on the back facing the residence, and the control system also allows the lights at the back to be turned off if necessary and if there are any issues. But it's there's plenty of sort of the ability to control, and it hasn't got sort of the high density areas at the back of the facing the residence in any case.
Okay, and the other one really was, you know, again with the overlooking, they actually said they're going to erect a 6-foot fence around the perimeter.
No, there is a part fence. It's not a fence. It's sort of been artistic. It's been designed by an artist, and it is a screen for the residents, and this has been designed in conjunction with the residents. And this is at the end of the public realm, not the park, the other side of the arena, where the public realm area sort of comes up to the wall across from the marina residence. So that is something which has been designed and discussed at length with the residents, and it's something they actually wanted to give them some more privacy. So that's going into place. And on the park side of the arena, there is a green hedge area which further gives privacy from the park area towards the flats as well.
Okay, right. Thanks. If we move on to the next one, the Kingsway infrastructure.
Yeah, not a lot to say on this. This is now almost complete. There are some overspend issues linked to the failure of the original contractor, etc. An FPR 7 has been approved by Cabinet now to finalise the scheme and to actually sort of get the contract finalised. So that's almost done and dusted in that respect. So that's it on the Kingsway infrastructure.
Yeah. Okay, any questions? No. Okay.
On 7172, the Kingsway, this is the building of the 100,000 square foot office block on the Oceana site. Contracts between the council and Bouygues, who have been appointed as the contractor for the site, have now been agreed. The contract is quite a substantial document that has now been sort of transferred to Bouygues. They're doing their final checks on that, so we're expecting that to be signed at any time in moving that forward. Pre-planning in terms of commencement conditions have been discharged, and we have an ongoing discussion on SABs with the drainage team, so that will be resolved hopefully fairly shortly. And it says programme to commence early November. It's probably going to be towards the end of November now because the contract hasn't quite been signed, but there's no issues on that. It's just a matter of practicality and signing. So again, that's moving forward into a substantial start on site.
Okay. I can see no question, but can I just go back? Actually, I know there was a change in the spec, shall we say, when they went out to tender originally. I'm not expecting to be told, you know, what the actual project cost is and so on at the end of the day. But is that now within budget? Within the original budget?
No, absolutely. I think that sort of there were a number of tenderers who originally didn't comply with the tender process, and they were making some suggestions, and the professional team together with the council, sort of reviewed all those suggestions, and we built any which we thought was sensible into the revised tender process. And it is now sort of, so we've accepted some of those potential alternative methods, and that's now being progressed by the contractor, and it is within budget.
Okay. Right, you can see no more questions. Wine Street.
Wine Street, currently on programme. We have had a bit of an issue in that when we're putting the bollards at the top of the street, there's some services being identified there during excavations which weren't on any plans, so we've got to deal with those. So that's something which is being resolved. So that's the main construction, which is actually going well, and it will remain on completion for later this month. The rainbow installations, this is looking to put 3 crossings in the area of Wine Street, which will be basically sort of, they're not actually the formal crossing points, and there's been a lot of discussion with the various interest groups in relation to this, and we've tried to sort of make sure that these crossings are as resilient as they are for the various sort of interest groups who will be using these things in the area. So that's that will be going in. So that is something which is going to be a first for Swansea in that respect.
Okay, thanks for that. I can see no questions on that. The Shaping Swansea.
Shaping Swansea, we've issued the contract to Urban Splash. So we're expecting that to be resolved in the next month. We've had some very positive interest in the civic site, for example, from leisure operators. So there are various discussions going on there. There's a meeting next week with them and Urban Splash to start discussions with that project. We've also arranged a meeting with Urban Splash, our planning team, to look at the CADU potential listing of the Civic Centre. So there's some active work going on that as well.
Okay, Chris Ollie.
Thanks, Hugh. I'm quite surprised that the development, the discussions with the leisure operator about the Civic Centre site. That's quite interesting. Look forward to seeing what that comes out with, and also interested to see what comes out about this discussions with CADO about listing of the Civic Centre. I didn't think that was actually going forward, but there we are. No, it'll be interesting comments to see what they come up with the city centre.
Don't disagree with you at all. I think sort of we are obviously, so listing of the Civic Centre would have an issue, an impact, and we need to work closely with CADU. We've worked with them very well on a number of buildings across Swansea, so we've got a good relationship with them. So we just need an honest discussion about how we take that forward. So the leisure operator is not actually for the Civic Centre building itself; it's for on the sites around the Civic Centre, and it would be a very positive addition to Swansea if we get some traction with that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I know what you're talking about, but anyway, but it would be I would love to be on a fly on the wall when you would talk to CADU about the Civic Centre. Been there before, very interesting, and they'll gang up on you if they will, Hugh.
Sorry,
yes, well,
I'm sorry, to be a bit vague actually. So you actually said about the the site around the Civic Centre. What areas are we actually talking about?
Well, the whole Civic Centre site is about 17 acres, so it's quite a large site. So this covers everything from Paxton Street, all the green areas around the Civic Centre, and the car park on the Mumble side of the building as well. So that is the overall site. I'm not saying all that's going to be built on. Lots of it is going to remain green, and it's just looking to create a really positive destination in that area, which is well linked to the city centre.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Right. What are we on now then? We're on
to Mariner Street.
Yes. Sorry. Yeah. Thank you.
Mariner Street is now is now largely complete. There is some sort of cladding still waiting to go on because it's been stuck in a port in Spain due to sort of transport and Brexit issues. So that's so sectional completion's been granted, and the first students are now in occupation in terms of their actually living in the building. There are some works to be completed. The units in terms of the ground floor, they're scheduled for completion in December, with people with one of the tenants potentially occupying in December and the others in the new year. So that's a good news story, and I think it's a great addition to the top end of Wine Street, which is going to drive some vitality and into that area as well, which is much needed.
Okay, right, Castle Square.
Castle Square, basically, we are looking to put an FPR7 report seeking funding to take the scheme forward. It's now at RIBA stage 2, and it is moving to RIBA stage 3 in terms of designs. So those are getting to an advanced stage. Maintenance cost is something which is very important, and we're having discussions with various council colleagues about that and how we deal with those, and can we actually look at ring fencing any of the income from the generated by Castle Gardens to actually fund the maintenance of that moving forward. So that's quite a key element for me. And we're also looking and having discussions with various grant providers at the moment to look to how far we can mitigate the cost of the works to actually sort of get grant to partially fund the scheme. So that's an ongoing piece of work.
Okay, Chris Ori.
Yeah, I'm a bit confused about this one because I thought we had a project manager, or we were employing a project manager to look after this here. And add to that, the potential grant funding. I genuinely thought the funding for this was virtually secure within the overall capital budget, and the project manager was going to, come forward with some a bit further along the line than where we are. So what is the current position?
The council is the developer of this scheme. We have a professional team appointed who are advising us, and the funds have been allocated for the workup costs in terms of all fees, etc. The capital costs of delivering the scheme have not been approved as yet, and that's what the FPR7 will be looking to seek funding, capital funding to deliver the scheme. And we are looking to mitigate the costs of the capital funding by seeking grant monies to reduce the actual capital spend that the council needs to make.
Okay, so we haven't got a project manager appointed specifically for Castle Square.
We have got a project manager. We've got a sort of a development manager and a full professional team. So they are working all the detail up with the architects, etc. But it is the council is the ultimate decision maker and the developer of the scheme.
Okay, so the FPR7 will outline the capital cost as well as any additional costs. I agree with you about the ring fencing of monies to allow the lighting and the cleaning and what have you to be done, but it'd be interesting to see what the FPR7 reads.
Yeah, that would probably be for next month, I suspect.
And just to clarify on that point as well, we're actually funding, hopefully with grant support, actually the scheme, so that the private sector really just will take up the lease agreements of any units.
That's correct. Yes.
Right. There's no contribution from the private sector at all with the capital scheme then.
Well, there may be through some of the fit-out provisions, but that's down to negotiations and discussions, which will be ongoing once we get into the letting discussions.
Okay, thanks. Right, the community hub.
Community hub. This is it is moving forward. There are issues which are trying to be addressed, and this links into the archive side of things. Jeff Bacon is doing a lot of work on this at the moment, and discussions are ongoing with the archives teams and Welsh Government in that respect. There are some enabling works which are on site, and that's mainly asbestos stripping and some other bits and pieces to get the site ready for the contractor to start in due course. So that's where we are on that one.
Okay, so you're actually talking about the risks then the archive store it will not achieve. So have we got alternative provision for the archives?
Well, that's an ongoing discussion at the moment. Obviously, sort of the archives currently sit in the basement and ground floor of Civic Centre. So if that is going to move to alternative use, it needs to move. So the current proposal is that they go into the BHS building, and all the proper equipment and sort of environmental measures would be put into place to allow that to happen. So that's the current sort of plan which the council is working to.
Okay. Paxton.
Thanks, Chairman. Is there still any talk, Hugh, about the archives going up to Cardiff?
Not that I'm aware of.
Because I saw that's been suggested until the home is actually found and put in place and whatever. And there was obviously concerns then whether we'd ever come back, to be honest.
No, I don't disagree with you on that. That's not something I'm aware of, but happy to sort of speak to Jeff and come back to you on that one.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Right, the Palace Theatre.
Peter's got his hand up.
Oh, sorry, I can't see it, Peter. Oh, yes, I can. Yes. Right, Peter. Sorry.
I just wanted to say on the archives, the FR7 report is going to Cabinet in November, and the Scrutiny Programme Committee will be doing some pre-decision scrutiny on that, so we'll be able to ask a lot more detailed questions on the archives at that time. And of course, the Archives Committee is also meeting with developers in regard to the BHS building, and there are some concerns about whether it's suitable, but we'll address that as part of the forthcoming scrutiny.
Yes, and just to be clear on that, it is the council who are the developers on that one, in terms of, so it is our building in that respect. Yeah. Right.
We'll talk about the people who are actually being commissioned by the council to develop.
Okay. Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Fine.
Thanks for that, Peter. Right. The Palace Theatre.
Palace Theatre. I think this is a more positive story now. R&M Williams, the contractor, is now sort of taking access to the site for contract start. So that's all they're mobilising, and it's all being sort of progressed on site with an end date of November 2022. So that's a good news story, and hopefully that building will be brought back to life in a very positive manner.
Okay. Right, the pontoons, Copperworks.
Pontoons. This is again sort of an ongoing issue. We've been looking at sort of the management and maintenance and how the pontoons get used. People like the Copperjack, people like the University Rowing Club. So that's been discussed with them in terms of how they can use the pontoons. We're only talking about very short-term agreements at the moment because the wider Havard area is part of the Shaping Swansea proposals, so we don't want to undermine anything which could come forward with that. So, but having the pontoons and having sort of people being able to travel from the city to the Havard area, and having sort of leisure use of those the pontoons is very positive for the areas and for Swansea generally. So that's something which is an ongoing aspect of discussions.
Okay, thanks, Mike White.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just 2 points really. Have any discussions already been taking place between the two, as you say, users really, the Copperjack and the rowing club representatives? And secondly, and what timescales would you be looking at to put the pontoons in place?
On your first point, there have been a number of discussions and meetings with both the Copperjack and the University Rowing Club representatives. So that's something which has been ongoing for probably a couple of years, actually, to be honest with you. So there's been some quite detailed discussions on that. obviously putting the pontoons in is subject to the funding discussions, and I haven't got a definitive time on that, but it's looking to do it as quickly as possible, and so it's a short-term thing and no longer, I would suggest, is the sort of delivery time frame.
Okay. Right, thanks for that. There's a couple of items that are not on here. I'm sorry, I can't remember. The New Zealand firm, with the not the
Skyline.
Skyline, sorry, that's the word. Yeah, there's nothing. Any news actually on that? Or?
Things only don't appear on this list if there's no real sort of updates. The only update which since this has been written. They have submitted their revised business case now to Welsh Government for the funding discussions, so that's all positive. They've also engaged architects on the design side, so there's a lot happening behind the scenes on that one, really, with which is all very positive, to be honest with you, in terms of moving forward. The key to that is the funding offer, which will then go to the board for a final decision from Skyline.
Okay, thanks. And the other one, as I said, you've probably got no news actually on it. Was the the gin distillery? Is it the? I thought that was requiring additional funding.
As with all construction projects, the materials and labour costs are an issue, but that is obviously substantially on site as we speak. It is moving forward, and there are discussions with. Heritage Lottery Fund about sort of potential additional funding towards that.
Okay, thanks. Right, Mike, you still got your hand up, is it? Do you want to ask a question?
No.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, Chair.
That's all right, don't worry. I often do it. Chris Ollie.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Hugh, on Skyline, they put in this revised business case. They've got a project in Sheffield which is now on hold. When they put this revised business case in, is it based on the same project that we were discussing earlier, or is there any difference in the project?
There is no project in Sheffield anymore because the council.
No, they closed it down.
They were Skyline were an underlessee of a company called Extreme, and the council withdrew their offer to Extreme, so the whole chain fell in that respect. Nothing to do with Skyline, to be honest with you, but they're now not progressing the Sheffield project. So the only project they're progressing in Europe currently is Swansea, which is a really positive issue. They have done a lot of work on the scheme. The bit which they were unsure about, shall we say, is the restaurant offer. That is the only bit that they've changed at the moment. They have taken the restaurant out of the scheme, and it will not be in the first phase of the delivery. But what they've replaced it with is an area for local food offerings, which is from their perspective is less risk in terms of the first phase. If everything goes to plan and it works out and there is significant demand for the restaurant use, they will reintroduce that as a later phase. That is really the only change to the scheme. They're introducing sort of further elements. There was always a zip wire in there, which is still being planned, but they're also looking at something called a sky swing, but please don't ask me what that is because I don't really know, if I'm honest. I need to look what that is. So it's all very positive, I think, at the moment, and they are committing money to actually taking the scheme forward.
Good.
Okay,
thank you.
Okay, thanks for that, Hugh. Hopefully we'll have some more information actually on the Civic Centre and Urban Splash, the next time, and probably hopefully with the Skyline as well, so we can have something included. Right, okay, if there's no more questions, thanks very much for that, Hugh, once again. Okay, if we move on to the next item, the work programme. Emily, you're going to have to help me here because the computer I was using, which was Mary's, has gone blank and it won't take the code. So if you can elaborate on what the next item is in the work programme. And the date of the next meeting?
Councillor Jones, no problem. Bear with me a moment while that loads up.
Okay.
So looking ahead to the meeting in January, we have the Swansea Business Improvement District item and Russell Greenslade coming to the meeting there. We also have an item on foreshore developments, and Jeff Bacon is set to come along to that as well.
Okay, wonderful. Right, and what's the date of that meeting?
That's set for the 25th of January.
25th of January, okay, that'll be after Christmas. Okay, right, and the last item on the agenda was the letter to our Robert Francis Davis, which again, we're actually going to approach it, if you remember when we started the meeting with regard to the funding for the universities. You can just follow that up. Okay, right, thanks very much. If we can close the meeting now. Emily, I'll perhaps